Hello and welcome to Focus on Israel, which looks at the Holy Land. I'm Paul Calvert. Psalm 23 verse 6 from the New King James Bible says this: "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever."
I'm with Steven Cauthen from Christians Against Antisemitism. Now, Steven, what do you do to fight antisemitism?
So there are multiple things we do. So Christians Against Antisemitism isn't like an organization, more it's a movement. So there are different people that use it in different ways. So I'm one of the founders, and what we do is we set up a sign. We go out to places where there are Jewish people and other people. We set up the sign, we have a table, and we engage people in conversation. This all started after October 7th, when we saw there was so much anti-Semitism rising around. And me and a couple other people just felt like we need to do something. Like, what is it we can do? And so we go up and set up these tables. We have cards. We hand out the cards. We talk to people, trying to both encourage people who are, they don't have to be Christian, but encourage people to think about the issue of anti-Semitism, whether Christian or not, and to take a stand with us against it. But also to encourage Jewish people that we meet to say, hey, you're not alone. There are people who are standing with you against this.
I imagine Jews very much appreciate that, because it sometimes feels like the whole world is against them. But then when someone who's a Christian says, look, hey, we care for you and we love you, they must find that really important.
Yeah, it's really impactful. So we go out on the boardwalk sometimes close to a beach, and we have people running by. And I've seen multiple times where Jewish people saw the sign and they did a double take, came back and started talking to us. And I got a huge hug from a guy from New Jersey one time that was just saying, we're so overjoyed at what you're doing. It's an important thing, especially with the long history of Christian anti-Semitism. To have Christians today saying we're against anti-Semitism is a big deal.
How do people respond on the streets? Do you get a negative response as well?
It's interesting because we expected a strong negative response, and we've had a few, but not as many as you would expect, because we're intentionally making it a non-political way. So it's not Christians supporting Israel, right? Because even though many of us do support Israel, we decided to make the focus not on any of the political aspects, but just on anti-Semitism itself. And so there's very few people who are just going to outright say, I support hatred of a different people group, right? So we don't get as much negative feedback as we expected. But the point that we're being out there and talking about it, we do have conversations with people who are, let's say, anti-Israel in their mindset, and they read anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism, and so they start arguing with us about these things. And so it's good conversations, because we desire to have dialogue with people who are on opposing positions as well, so that we can help correct some of their misconceptions.
Is anti-Semitism the same as anti-Zionism? Are they the same thing, or is it different?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of debate back and forth about this. The line I take about that, I would say they aren't exactly the same, but I think that the vast majority of anti-Zionism is just anti-Semitism under a different name. So it is possible for somebody to be anti-Zionist, not necessarily anti-Semitic. I haven't really seen that a lot. I think they almost always go hand in hand. But I think a lot of the motivation is just, let's find a different word for this hatred of Jewish people that doesn't sound as bad in modern society.
Now, you're in Florida. Have you seen a rise in anti-Semitism incidents in your area?
So it hasn't been so bad here. We have a very large Jewish community. Here in South Florida, it's the sixth largest Jewish community in the world, about 600,000 Jewish people. So that kind of stamps down a lot of the anti-Semitism around, because people, a lot of times, as you know, anti-Semitism, hatred of any people especially, but anti-Semitism comes about just from lack of knowledge, ignorance, right? Not having connection with Israelis, not having connection with Jewish people, not having that, oh, this is a real person. And so because there's so many Jewish people here, it keeps that down. There have been incidences at the university campuses of protests, or people putting up anti-Semitic signs and trying to just preach this nonsense. There's been some distribution of flyers into neighborhoods, or the swastikas and things like that, but it hasn't been severe here, thankfully.
In the UK, Jews are having that conversation about how long should we stay in London, in the UK, because of what's happening in the UK. Are Jews having the same sort of conversations where you are?
No, actually. So where we are is a place where people come to if they're not liking what's going on in their area. So South Florida is pretty, also government systems are pretty open and willing to stand with Jewish people. So we've had people coming down from New York. That's been happening for years, and from other places. So it's not about whether to stay or not. I mean, it's not perfect here, but in a way, it's a little bit of a haven. of being here. But one thing that's advantageous for us as we're taking a stand against anti-Semitism is we have tourists here that come from all over the world, right? So we have people that we're able to talk to from who knows where, every place you can imagine. We run into people. And so we're kind of pushing back on that worldwide anti-Semitism by talking to people one by one as we encounter them here.
Now, Mamdani became the mayor of New York. So has that sort of pushed a lot of Jews down from New York into Florida?
Yeah, I don't know any numbers about that, but I know I've heard a lot of talk about that. So whether they actually actively left, but I know a lot of them have been thinking about it. So a lot of people have been discouraged for the past 6 years or so with things happening in New York. We've had a huge wave of people coming down. So I think Mamdani is just another straw on the pile, kind of moving people in that direction.
Now, why should Christians stand against anti-Semitism?
Yeah, that's a great point. We have the cards and the information on the website. I want to read that to you because this stuff we thought out really well. There's several points there. The first one is, it's kind of obvious, but it's important to say, anti-Semitism is wrong, right? Hatred of any people group is wrong. Anti-Semitism is wrong. So we all should stand up against that. But for Christians especially, we have a lot of connections between Jewish people and Christians. The quote, love your neighbor as yourself, comes from Leviticus 19:18 in the Torah, and also Matthew 22:39, where Jesus quoted it. So that love your neighbor as yourself is a core principle. A big one for believers in Jesus is that Jesus is Jewish, right? So, I mean, how can you be anti-Semitic? How can you hate Jewish people if you claim to follow a Jewish man? People don't think about this a lot of times, but the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, is a Jewish book written by Jewish people. Right, so there's a big connection there. And then a big thing about for us as Christians is that our faith as Christians is based on the promises of the Jewish prophets. So our faith in Jesus is based on those promises that the prophets said the Messiah would come. And so from a spiritual standpoint, it doesn't make any sense for a Christian to be anti-Semitic. But I think there's added weight and added need for Christians to be vocal in opposing anti-Semitism, because for the past 2,000 years, the Christians have been some of the strongest anti-Semites.
Yeah, we've seen people like Martin Luther. He was a very, very strong anti-Semite who Hitler actually used some of his material to encourage himself in the work that he was doing. So is your stand building a bridge between the Jewish community and the Christian community?
I think it is. And that's one of our goals, is we want to build that bridge there. We work not just going out, we also work with different churches in the area, encouraging them to take their own stand. And a pastor from a church went to an event, remembrance event for October 7th, and they asked him to pray. And it was really interesting because a Jewish woman came up to him afterwards and said, "Why are you here? I thought Christians hated Jews." And so for the pastor to be there to explain to him, no, we don't. We love you. We stand with you. It's a huge thing. So like I talked earlier about, like, sometimes you don't have this crossover of communication. A lot of times a lot of Jewish people have not had communication with Christians who support them and stand with Israel. So they know they're out there, but they haven't actually had these dialogues. So us being out on the streets and going to events and talking with people allows us to have those dialogues and to express to them our stance and the fact that we're standing with them. So yeah, there have been really amazing bridges built.
Well, how important is this for being a light into the community?
This is really important. So for us as believers in Jesus, we're called to show Jesus' love to others. Okay, and then we think about Jewish people. What do they need? What can we help them with? Most Jewish people have a pretty good financial situation. They're not starving or having issues here. But one of their biggest needs is to not be hated. So after October 7th, honestly, for myself, I would have told you, before October 7th, I would have told you that anti-Semitism was decreasing in the world. But we saw since then the outrageous rise in the rhetoric, but also in physical attacks on Jewish people. And so that need, that big felt need that Jewish people have, is to not be hated. And so for us to show the love of Jesus by loving others, loving Jewish people who are experiencing this hatred, it's a great way to show light into the community.
Do you think the media is partly responsible for the rise in anti-Semitism in the way they report about Israel?
Yeah, I definitely think that is true. As we know, pretty much all media has a bias, and the bias towards Israel has become much more clear in a lot of the media reporting. They're intentionally, I read some articles and it just disgusts me, because even the issue they're talking about is not such a bad issue. I remember once from, I'm not going to name the media outlet, but there was a media outlet that was reporting on Israel calling into Gaza and telling people to evacuate a building. There was a specific guy, they were discussing a situation, or Israel called him, that tell him to evacuate the building, we're going to bomb the building. And that's a great thing, that Israel's trying to preserve civilian life. But the media organization was reporting it as such a terrible thing, that Israel's spying on them, that they know the guy's cell phone number. And I'm thinking to myself, who else even does this?
Yeah.
Israel is going overboard, trying to protect civilian lives, and it's being reported as if it's a negative thing. So it's a really, really horrific situation. So, like I said, Christians Against Antisemitism is not an organization, but there's a lot of people working together with it. And some of us have worked on a film that we've put together to kind of counter this narrative that was just released. It's called Shadows of October, Israel Under Siege. And so the idea behind this film was to go to Israel, interview some of the survivors, interview some experts on the situation, and talk both about the events of October 7th, but also the aftermath and the rise in anti-Semitism since then, and to examine what can we do, being Christians or non-Christians, either way, what can we do going forward with this situation? So I think what's needed is a big counter push in the media, where it doesn't have to necessarily be from the top down, big media. It can just be a lot of us as Christians going online, countering this narrative, pushing back with facts, sharing videos, sharing the film, like I said, Shadows of October, any of these kind of things to really push back against the negative media propaganda.
Was it difficult making this film, hearing all the different stories?
It was extremely difficult. So I wasn't on the team that went and filmed, but I had to watch through the interviews multiple times as we're editing through them. It was just horrific. I mean, like, even having heard the stories multiple times, I'm still listening and tears are coming to my eyes because it's just horrible. I mean, it's horrible. The whole situation is horrible. But to remember the fact that it was Hamas that attacked and invaded Israel and started all of this, and the things that they did, it doesn't make any sense that the world has such hatred for Israel when Israel is the victim in this situation.
Yeah, you hear these stories and you hear how terrible Hamas was in what happened, and then the next minute, all this anti-Semitism is rising and everybody hates the Jews. It's just totally turned itself on its head, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that when October 7th happened, there was like maybe 24 hours where there was some sympathy for Jewish people, for Israel. And then right away, the news media started accusing Israel for what they would do. Israel didn't immediately respond. Israel had a considered, measured response, but right away, the media was condemning them for what they thought they would do. It's inconceivable to me, but it's evidence of the evil in men's hearts, right? There is this evil there. There's this hatred there that we thought perhaps had been stomped out in World War II, but we come to find out this is alive and thriving, and the hatred for Israel is actually a popular thing in our culture these days.
Has there been a good response to the film, and who is the film actually aimed at?
So the film was just released this past Friday, so it's very new still. It's been a great positive response from people we've talked to so far. There's no one audience that it's aimed at. So the thing is, we would love for people who oppose our point of view to watch the film and get their minds changed. We realize, though, that that's pretty rare. And so the other idea is to get people mobilized, right? So for Christians to watch the film and realize, oh, I need to actually do something. I need to stand up. I need to take a stance here, right? Christians Against Antisemitism. And then for Jewish people to watch the film who may already know all the facts, but again, to see, oh, we're not alone. There are these other people who are standing with us against the anti-Semitism.
And how can people actually see this film?
So it depends on where you are in the world, because different streaming services. In the United States, it's available on Google Play, Apple, and soon be available on Amazon. If you go to shadowsofoctober.com, you will find the information about the up-to-date streaming services, and you can click on those and find out where it's available in your area.
What is your prayer for the Jewish people all around the world?
That's a big one. So it's multiple things. Like we all know, who've been involved in this and seen these things happening, there's a scar, there's a trauma on Israelis and on Jewish people around the world that they're going to live through with the rest of their lives because of October 7th, because of the response afterwards. So one of my big prayers is that Jewish people would see that they're not alone, that Christians would stand up with them, that they would link arms together, and that this hatred that's been in the past, this dissonance, this wall built up between them would start to melt down. And also at the same time, that they would see the love of Jesus, they would see the love of the Messiah, and that it would move them to search for the truth of God.
The Bible says God works for those who love him. Are you seeing God use this anti-Semitism and turning it upside down and actually using it for good for the Jewish people?
Yeah, I have actually. There are conversations happening that I thought would have never happened in the past. Just an interest because of what they're seeing, because of how they're feeling isolated, and they see people standing with them. There's an openness to relationship and an openness to conversation that wouldn't happen before. So we have on one of the university campuses that we go to, there's a Chabad rabbi, an ultra-Orthodox Haredi rabbi who we have a really good relationship with. He's an amazing man. We bring teams down to our area to educate them on Jewish culture and on how to have dialogue and about the history of anti-Semitism. And so he meets with those teams. He shares with them about his life, his experience. And it's phenomenal. That kind of relationship I would have never thought would be of interest in the past. And this all came about because we were out with the table taking a stance against anti-Semitism. And he saw that, and then there was just connection. So, yeah, there's a lot of relationships that are being built, a lot of barriers and walls that are being broken down as we are taking this stance for what is right.
How are the universities at the moment?
So again, it depends on the place. So here, the universities are pretty calm. Like there were some protests in the past. There are still some scattered protests, I think, at different universities, but it's not as organized, large scale as it was before. I think what's happening rather is that the narrative is just becoming standardized about Israel being the bad guy. And so wherever people are, it's just the norm, especially in that age group, which is looking for social change, political change. They see this as the social action point of this generation. And so it's almost like you are anti-Israel because you're in this age group. And it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough because then the people who are looking for facts and are wanting to stand with the Jewish people, then they're ostracized, they're put on the outside. So I don't think it's so much on the large scale anymore, but it's more the one-to-one, that narrative becoming accepted as normal, which, by the way, is very frightening because that's some of what happened pre-World War II in Nazi Germany, right? This rewriting of the narrative. The people don't realize this built up for years and years and years before the Holocaust actually happened. And so this is another thing that's important for us to stand against, is not to just sit by complacent while this narrative is being pushed on people young and old alike.
Have the students actually worked out which river and which sea it is that they're shouting about?
From the river to the sea. No, that's a good point. Most people who are protesting this and chanting the slogans, they don't have any understanding of the facts themselves.
You just talked about World War II. Could you actually see with the mood of what people are feeling against Israel at the moment and the negativity, could you actually see another Holocaust sort of taking place today because of the mood and the hatred that there is towards the Jewish people, that people maybe would quite easily send a Jew to a concentration camp or kill a Jew because, after all, they killed the babies in Gaza?
Yeah, I don't think we're at that point right now, but I definitely see the trajectory going in that direction because there's so much hatred towards Jewish people. And then the violence that you see, this is what really shocks me in many ways. So, by the way, just to get back to the point about Israel, you can support the Jewish people and support the existence of Israel without agreeing with the Israeli government is doing, right? I mean, people realize that in general. But a lot of times, these people who are anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, they would say, they don't differentiate between Israelis and Jewish people. So there may be Jewish people in the UK or in America, other places, who've never been to Israel, don't really have a connection there, and they're being persecuted and hated just because they're Jewish. Right? That's not just the political aspect. There's something more that's going on there. There was an attack here, I don't know, a year ago, maybe less, where a guy drove into a synagogue and he was attacking them because they were Israel. But the reason was the synagogue said Beth Israel. So they're Jewish, right? They have not necessarily any connection to Israel, having been there or being Israeli citizens or fighting in the military or anything, but they're being attacked just because of that. So that's definitely an expanding of the idea here. And that's also what we see. The vilification of Jewish people is what we see in the lead up to the Holocaust and World War II. So if things keep going in this direction, absolutely, I can imagine some people willingly slaughtering or sending Jewish people off to their deaths.
What is your website, Facebook page for people who'd like to know more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so our organization, we don't do a lot on social media. A lot of our stuff is kind of grassroots. So our website is christiansagainstantisemitism.com. christiansagainstantisemitism.com. We have information there on how you can take a stand yourself against anti-Semitism. There's some pictures of what other people have been doing. There's a pledge you can sign saying, I pledge to stand with the Jewish people. Contact information if you want to know more. Yeah, we love to help others as they're taking a similar kind of stance.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much for sharing today.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. Pray that God will move by his mighty power in the Holy Land and bring his peace.